Hello, everybody. We are going to talk about right now some needed changes in the prison system. States itself have different programs in prison. There may be some programs in New York prison that are not available in Minnesota prison, or the state of Texas may have programs that the state of New York doesn't have. Uh, there are many similarities in the states itself and the ways that the system runs, but we'll speak from the New York perspective right now. And I believe that the change that I mentioned would work in any state regardless. So the first thing I would like to say is that education is the most important thing I believe that we can do for men in prison. There's some people that hold the concept that they just believe in incarceration, no rehabilitation, just incarcerate. Well, if 70% of the population is going to be released back into society, do you want a same or worse individual coming back into your neighborhood, or do you want someone who has been rehabilitated coming back into your neighborhood? Because it's your neighborhood or many neighborhoods that the men are coming back to. And so I would say I would want a man that has been rehabilitated. But the New York State prison system has pretty much abandoned rehabilitation, even though they have it on paper. And I could explain a lot of that. They really don't have rehabilitation in the prison system. They have hints and dots of it in certain places. So a large percentage of men go into prison and they do not possess a high school diploma. And it is mandatory that they go to school to get their GED. But it's very easy to skate around that when you're in the prison system. And so I think they need to focus on making sure prisoners obtain their GED. One way to do that is, instead of saying they have to go to school for only half a day, they should make their morning and afternoon program mandatory school, mandatory GED. If you don't have one already, you have to go for a full day's worth of programs, and other things can be put aside until we educate the prisoner. Okay. The reason for this is that education, even though it's not the answer to the world. As I've said, a person who is intelligent can do twice the damage of a person who is dumb. I said that in one of my recent videos. And I said that when you educate a man in mind and not in morals, you create a menace to society. So education is not the answer to solve the problems. But and we can get to the moral part later. What education does do is builds a tremendous amount of self-esteem inside of the man that's in prison. It makes him more employable. It helps him understand himself. It helps him understand the way the world works more. Education has many benefits. Okay. But education really focuses on also helping you solve problems. Like when you have a math problem and you say, I'll never use this math. And you're in high school and you're trying to figure out this math and you're like, this is useless. I'm never going to use this math for as long as I live. That may be true. But what that math problem is teaching you to do is it's teaching your brain how to solve problems, whether it be a math problem or a problem that comes in life. It wires your brain that teaches you how to be patient, how to think, how to solve problems, how to just look at things in a different way. So education is very important. We need to educate the men. There is no real secondary education in the New York prison system. College was basically removed from the prison system, besides like a master's program that I believe they have in Sing Sing, which applies to such a small percentage of the population, not even 1%, because the majority don't even have a GED, never mind an associate's or a bachelor's. What's a master's program going to do? Right? They had college in the prison system, but the correctional officers complained, and the correctional officers union complained that their children had to pay for college. So how were the prisoners getting it for free? But that's why I said we need to focus on rehabilitation. It's not about who's getting what for free. It's about creating a lower recidivism rate by educating the men and giving them some self-worth. Education creates self-worth inside of people. And if people feel like there's something, then they're more reluctant to jeopardize their life by doing something criminal because they feel like somebody. And they also have more job opportunities by being educated. So we need to bring college back into the prison system. I believe that's one of the big changes that could be made. There were many college professors who were willing to volunteer their time when the correctional officers had the argument that they have to pay. And then the volunteer said, we'll come in there and volunteer our time to teach the prisoners. But they still didn't want it. The point was that there was a hate that the prisoners were getting educated. They didn't want that. They didn't want an educated prisoner. That's what the system didn't want. So they pulled the college out. See, an educated prisoner goes against everything they're trying to accomplish with the business of the Department of Corrections, but that's a different story. So that definitely needs to come back. There needs to be mandatory classes of teaching prisoners morals and values. In other words, we need to get some philosophic speakers to come into the prison system, hire civilians that make it mandatory for prisoners to go to a class and learn about morals, learn about standards, learn about values, learn about the proper way to conduct yourself in society. I don't say this as a low blow, right? A majority of the prisoners come from very low income families, from very struggling neighborhoods. They come from drug addicted parents, many of them. A lot of people had parents who were crack addicts, alcoholics, parents who were abusive, parents who were, not focused on education. And so a lot of the men from prison came from families that weren't families. They were broken. Myself included. I had divorced parents. My father left when I was 4, and my mother was severely mentally ill, and my father never talked to me once in life about setting goals, about doing anything, right? So many of the prisoners come from those types of families. So we need to create some classes on morals in society and teaching people what's important, teaching prisoners what's significant, teaching prisoners what's meaningful, teaching them how to carry and conduct themselves in a society where they can benefit from it instead of being scared of society and feeling like they have to rebel. And so we need to get some classes where we really teach the prisoners, the men, about how to live life the proper way. Because there's none of that in prison. There's no one sitting them down and talking to them and saying, listen, tell me what you would do in this situation or that situation. And then listening to the prisoner's answer and then correcting them and say, no, well, that point is good, but this is the way you should approach this and this is the way you should approach that. A lot of people, as an example, if you ask a prisoner a hypothetical question, you're in McDonald's and someone bumps into you and they don't say, excuse me, and the prisoner turns around and says, yo, I'm punching that guy in the face, right? Because that has been his reaction to situations his whole life. That was kind of my reaction when I was naive and ignorant and young and crazy and wild. If someone bumped into me and didn't say excuse me and got nasty, I may turn around and punch him in the face, right? So it needs to be explained. It needs to be taught on the proper way to live life inside a society. So now, if you start even taking those two things, you start to educate the prisoner, give him some self-worth, then you start educating him about the proper way to live in society, so a little progress can start to be made. So that change needs to be made. We need to bring some motivational speakers inside of the prison system on a regular basis. People that can motivate are very powerful. When you get inside of someone's head, this is very powerful. You need like a man like Les Brown. Can't bring in Les Brown, and Les Brown's an old timer now. But if you ever listen to someone like Les Brown, right, he drops so many jewels, right, that he can really inspire people. Anthony Robbins can really inspire people. My favorite in the world is Les Brown. I love him. You know what I mean? Any of you who never listened to Les Brown, what a story. What a powerful story of success and being able to go from the bottom of the barrel to become a very successful man. Right. And so I think some motivational speakers need to come in to the prison system and get into these guys' heads. not just one time, not bringing in a motivational speaker once a month. I'm talking about hiring a civilian who works in the facility 7 days a week, 5 days a week, and he holds a class every day where prisoners could go there and participate in conversation that is motivational, right? Instead of sitting in their cell, yo, son, what's up all day, right? Yo, let's roll this blunt up. Go learn something, right? And they will take advantage of it if the system will put it in their face. They will take advantage of it if they do that. Besides things like this, cameras need to be put into the prison system. Cameras and body cameras need to be put into the New York State prison system. When I was in Attica prison, there were no cameras, not one, in anywhere inside of the facility. The only time they did any filming was in the mess hall when men went in to eat. They had put up an old camcorder, old-fashioned camcorder, was with the officer in a little bubble where he could look down, and you were filmed when you were eating. Otherwise, the hallways had no cameras. All the crosswalks had no cameras. You know, I think they put a camera in the yard too sometimes, but the inside of the facility, there were no cameras. So there need to be cameras. And if we could send $500 million, $2.10 billion to Ukraine, if we could give illegal immigrants $5,000 a piece and hotel rooms and spend billions of dollars on things like that, then we could put cameras in the prison system to make sure things are flowing correctly. Right? The cameras will not only protect the prisoners, but also protect the officers, right? If the officers are attacked unjustly, it will be on camera. And if the prisoners are attacked unjustly, it will be on camera. And the body cameras. And then you have to create some laws that the officers have to keep the body cameras on. And if they don't keep the body camera on from the second they clock into work and put the camera on their uniform and turn it on, if they don't turn it on, then they're in a position to be terminated from their position. It's a simple thing, right? Get the money, send the money there, have the cameras come in, right? And then set it up. I believe you have to start educating the officers more. In order to become a correctional officer, I think all you need is a high school diploma. That's not enough. It's not enough, right? Because it's a sensitive job for many reasons, right? First of all, as I've said before, whether this sounds proper or not, whether it sounds funny or not, most of the prisons, the majority, over 90%, are built outside of urban areas, right? They're built in the country. Attica, New York, in the country. Clinton, New York, in the country. You know, all these things. Upstate facility, the facility called Upstate. It's all the way upstate, right? Watertown, in the middle of the country, right? These things, farmland. They're in farmland, and so what they do is they employ mostly men and women who grew up in these rural areas, right? And then you're taking people from an urban community and you're putting them in these rural areas with people who were born and raised in rural areas. They were never really exposed to a majority of minorities in these rural areas. And then you give them power over them. This is a recipe for disaster. All right, which is clearly shown that it's a recipe for disaster. And so the answer to that is not in order to become a correctional officer, a high school diploma should not be good enough anymore. I'm not saying you have to have a master's degree. That wouldn't make sense. But a 2-year associate's degree in mandatory fields should come into effect. And what I mean by that is they should at least have a 2-year associate's degree in therapeutic community, psychology, human psychology. The officers need to be taught how to interact with people, right? How to understand and comprehend criminal thinking, right? So those should be mandatory. That an officer gets at least a 2-year degree in social work would be a good one. Don't you think that would be nice for an officer who has to deal with? Listen, I'm not coming from some liberal perspective either, right? So don't say I'm saying, oh, treat the prisoners like babies. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what will bring the violence down, what will decrease recidivism, what will keep officers safer, what will keep the facility safer, and what will prevent the beating death of Robert Brooks, right, is educating the officers on how to deal with people from the urban community and how to deal with human beings and the human soul in general. So asking an officer to get 2 years of college is too much to apply for that position. I don't think that's too much to ask, right? There needs to be a civilian presence inside of each facility, right? There needs to be civilians that are hired by the independent organization that work inside of the facility, like an oversight committee, to oversee the daily comings and goings, the daily ins and outs, the daily function of the prison system itself. There needs to be a civilian there 24 hours a day. Yes, they need to create an independent organization where these civilians, several of them, work inside of a facility and stay in the main areas. They could roam around with their passes. There's already people that do that. Like, as an example, every facility has religious leaders that roam around the whole prison with a pass, right? There needs to be a civilian oversight committee inside of the prisons that hold people accountable for the things that they do and for the things that they neglect to do, right? Because just like in the police departments, in the prison system, there is the blue wall of silence. The blue wall of silence is where officers don't tell on one another, right? And so this needs to come to an end. Prison is not about abusing prisoners, right? Prison is about incarcerating men and women who did something wrong on the street, putting them in prison to pay for their debt in society. That's what it's about, right? But we want to drop the recidivism rate. We want to create better citizens, right? And so these things need to be implemented in order to do that. There needs to be strict adherence to the laws in the Department of Corrections, because and now I'll explain that, right? If I have to give it on a very small example, if a prisoner goes down to the package room and the officer tells him he's not allowed to have something, but technically he's allowed to have it according to the guidelines, according to the rule book. Technically, the prisoner is allowed to have it, and they don't give it to him. This creates animosity in the prisoner. This creates frustration, anger. And what it does is it teaches the prisoner that authority is really full of shit. That's the subconscious message, the subliminal message that gets across to the prisoner. Oh, this fucking guy don't want to follow the rules either. He don't want to follow the law. So why should I? So when there are rules and regulations, the officers need to follow those rules and regulations instead of abusing the prisoner. Because a lot of times they do abuse the prisoner by not giving them what they're entitled to. I'm not saying they should be entitled to anything, right? Understand this about prison. I'm not just taking the prisoner's side here because I was incarcerated, right? You can't let prisoners do what they want to do. You can't allow that. You'll have mayhem inside of the prison, right? Because a lot of the prisoners are dangerous. A lot of the prisoners don't care about the rules. There are prisoners that would never take advantage of education. There are prisoners that would never go into any program to teach them about psychology, right? There's an alarming number of prisoners who are no good, right? And you can't eliminate things like solitary confinement, right? I'm a prisoner and I was put in solitary confinement many times, almost had a heart attack in solitary confinement, was freaking out. I got some insane stories about being in there, hate solitary confinement, think it's torture. I think it's torture. But what do you do with a prisoner who's running around stabbing other prisoners? Tell me what you do with them. You leave them in the population to continue to stab people? Right? So there's different answers to that. You could lock him in his cell 24 hours a day instead of putting him in a solitary cell, when there's a big difference. When you isolate someone, it's torture. But you can keep him in the population, but keep him locked in his cell. right? So there's different forms of solitary that could be used. So what I'm saying is, I understand you can't just eliminate solitary, right? Because you can't just have guys running around doing what they want to do. There's guys that'll run around killing people if you don't put them in solitary, right? And so, right, you have to look at things. You have to look at things from all different perspectives to understand what you should do and what you can't. I understand that officers need to be authoritarians or they'll get run over by the prisoners. I understand that. I understand they got to put their foot down, right? I understand that they got to be tough. It's a tough job and it's a hard job dealing with a lot of these prisoners. It's a real hard job. The majority of them don't have the mind frame where they're like, oh, okay, now that I'm in prison, I'll just be a good guy. No, a lot of them aren't like that. That doesn't mean that you beat them to death. That doesn't mean that you deny them something that they're entitled to have, right? And so education needs to be put in, college needs to be put in, classes need to be taught on morals and values. There needs to be motivational speakers. They need to work on the surveillance system. Officers need to get some type of education for themselves, on human psychology and social work, therapeutic behavior. There needs to be a civilian presence in there. And those are some of the major things that need to take place, right? Like, so hopefully, do I think that it will happen? I think that things happen very slowly. I think they happen much too slow. And I think it takes horrendous incidents to make very small. It takes big, large, horrendous incidents to make small, minute change. And that's not the way it should be. If you put some thinkers in there and say, let's make these changes before things take place again. Let's make these changes before things go bad. Then we won't hear about a lot of these negative stories. So those are a few of the changes, I think. Just a few. I got some more ideas. That's just a few. Let me go to Life's instruction book for the day and see when we open Life's instruction book to any page. Any page, we're going in the book. And let's see what we flip open to. Always put something in the collection plate. That's what it says. That's what it says. Right? I don't even know if I agree with that one. But always put something in the collection plate. It wasn't my picking. That's what I opened up to. All right? Everybody have a good day.